everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and joining me all the way in Portland, Maine, it is the holiest of holies. It is the Reverend Tracy. How are you doing?
I are good. I am in the middle of an interesting week, I guess. I am in week 2 of the new job. I think I did mention that on the show that I did get a part-time job.
Mhm.
Um, so that's going really well, kind of an interesting lax office. And then the Mr. Reverend is gone this week. And
Uh-oh.
it is interesting. He is all the way down south in Florida, like so far south that he made the joke about going to Cuba. And I went, yeah, but you're not, right? Like, so he is actually, I don't know whether to say enjoying 80-degree weather or is in 80-degree weather. I guess 70s or 80s or whatever right now was
Well,
their
I mean,
forecast for the
I don't know what's outside the window in Maine right now. So if it does it too,
30s and 40s. So it's
yeah,
about double the
uh,
temperature that we've had.
yeah.
And so what's interesting though is something I had even noticed when coming back from Oregon, returning to Maine after my deployment for my haunt month. Um, it's a different cold. And so it's almost like whenever you get a fish, right? Like you can't just put the fish like directly in like a jarring temperature. So human bodies work the same way in that sense. So when you get dumped in the middle of kind of extreme temperature differences,
Mhm.
there's a bit of shock your body has. Like it's not dangerous. Like saying like the term shock kind of gets people into, oh my God, you're like on the floor. But no, you can experience like shock symptoms and it not be like a medical a medical emergency type thing.
Yeah. No one's going.
Um, yeah, I'm not going to call 911 or anything, but I am going to have like an extra puffy jacket for him that he normally probably wouldn't need, but he's going to be outside working and I guess in a boat in alligator infested waters. So I mean, I'm sure that's fine. They've done this before. They know what they're doing.
Wasn't that on an episode of Miami Vice somewhere?
I mean, probably God. How many missing people episodes were like, well, that got eaten by a gator.
Well, I remember too, like they would have episodes like down in like the Florida Everglades to where they have those boats with like the big fan at the back of the boat that's actually propelling it and, chases like through like the Everglades that way. So, and then they would
Right.
always have the shot of like a crocodile or two that's just coming out of the water with its jaws open.
And they're mostly just minding their business. I guess they just do that. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, so that's where he is this week. That's where I am this week. How are you this week?
I'm doing good. This is the last week of school. It's actually looking like I'm probably going to be switching my major here because computers just don't seem as interesting a career as I once thought they were. But what's been fun this week, I do want to give a quick shout out, is listening to the professor on another podcast. Our friends at P&W Haunts and Homicide, who we've had on the show before, invited the professor because Aubrey has she says she's had some supernatural experiences happen to her and her family. So they were able to talk about that. I've already brought up that information on our social media pages, but I also dropped the link to their show in the show description here. But I was able to sit in and listen on that conversation when it actually happened. And it was a really fun
Nice. It sounds like an interesting show. I should probably, once I get into my rhythms of life, I'll probably be listening to more podcasts. I'll probably want to tootle over and check them out. I know Tim knows this about me. I'm not sure if it's something that I've talked about on the show. I'm neither here nor there when it comes to believing in like spirits and things like that, like ghosts and hauntings. I do kind of, I'm more along that line of like, why would so many people make it up? So I think there's like in my head it seems more probable that it is real than not. So I think I would actually enjoy podcasts like that, but
interview.
because I have that kind of finite amount of time and I know something I have talked about is my mental space is very sacred to me and the things that I let in there, like that matters.
Right.
So I'm hoping like as things like kind of get back to this rhythm of being back in office world again, because it's a really quiet office. I could see like having some time to listen to more podcasts than I have over the last year, ironically being at home a lot.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like when it comes to supernatural stuff, like I don't believe it, but I'm not gonna immediately outright dismiss it because like a lot of this, it's like God. How can you really claim something doesn't exist when there's just no 100% definitive way to say there isn't.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
exactly. And I know, like, for me, big thing about my personality as I intellectualize, I'm still trying to convince myself, like, if that's actually a bad thing. It's been said in the psychology and like mental health community is like intellectualizing is this. I'm like, yes, but is it the worst way to deal with things? So I get a little bit like that with it.
Yeah.
And I was telling you about there's this BuzzFeed after hours show. Because that's the thing with the pandemic and being home more.
Mhm.
I've watched more things. So talking about their show, it kind of reminded me of the BuzzFeed guys doing their Unsolved. And they had like a spin-off of their Crime Unsolved where they did like more of the like haunted, like trying to prove whether or not ghosts are a thing. And
Right.
there's this one guy on there that does not seem to respect it at all. But the one thing I do relate to him is the immediacy to intellectualize stuff. Like every little bang, snap, crackle, pop in a recording has an intellectual like explanation to him usually. He goes there first. And I don't think that's a bad place to visit. Like you should check, like, right? You should check like some things logically and make sure what it is. And then when it can't be explained by the horses, that's when you look for zebras. The horses, not zebras mentality of life.
Yeah, I mean, like growing up, there was a great radio show. I don't know if it's still in the air now, but it usually happened like at midnight and would just happen all throughout the night, called Coast to Coast AM. And the host of the show would routinely like interview like cryptozoologists, people that are into like Bigfoots and whatnot, or UFO people, and just give them an open forum to basically he would treat them in an interview like Larry King would treat like interviewing a president or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating hearing those people talk. Again, I don't believe that stuff, but you know I think back to my mother, for instance. Why am I bringing her up? Because, the last 10 years of her life, she ended up dealing with some brain tumors and whatnot, and she became ultra religious. And to me, trying to go to somebody and say, ghosts aren't real, right, would be like me going to her in the last 10 years of her life and saying, there is no God. When you die, you're just going to die. I mean, I would have been a major fucking asshole, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's really why, I guess not a lot of people agree with my mentality on how, some people were maybe not so great to me in the past, but I feel no need to seek any sort of vengeance or seek any reason to like educate them in how they wronged me.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, I think they're probably just living their life as best as they can.
Mhm.
And I just happen to like some things that happen to me happen just to be a side effect of, lack of education on certain aspects. But there's other things that were more extreme that, wasn't lack of education, was just wrong. But at the same time, I just don't feel it is my right to ruin someone's like end of their year's experience.
Well,
Like, my mother fully believes she doesn't listen to this show. I'm just going to go out on there and just say, I can't get the woman to call me back for a casual conversation. She probably doesn't listen to me. So I think I could safely share this. But
okay.
like, she really does believe that she raised my brother and I in like a very good Catholic home. And the funny thing that like immediately writes that out is like when we moved, there was no Catholic church near us. So I do remember like the okay, we prayed, we did the special prayer, the
Yeah.
Catholic supper prayer before dinner, and I still know it, but like that by no means equals what she seems to quote unquote remember. Now, I could sit there and dedicate my life to correcting her and telling her that her version of reality is not correct and that here's all the ways that I feel like you did poorly as a mother.
Yeah.
But why? Like, so there's two reasons why, right? It's either that like you're trying to talk to somebody who's not open to having their mind changed, which is what you run into with religion and stuff like that,
Mhm.
or you're just like needlessly hounding somebody for maybe stuff that's not relevant anymore. So anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because to your point, yeah, I mean, there are things that parents can do that as an adult, you very much have every right to have a sit down conversation with them. But a lot of times too, like I like in later years with my mother, for instance, like my sister and her would always argue about the past, but I ended up giving up because to your point, yeah, it's like she made a mistake, but a lot of times, but like you can't really go back and change that. It's like it's
Yeah.
done, and it's like if you say sorry and you make those amends, it's like you can't keep going back. But that's a different story for a
But
different.
it is. But going back, it's just like when people have a core belief, and there are a lot of people who tie whether or not ghosts and things like that exist is a core belief for them. So I guess tread lightly, don't be an asshole. Like I don't get why people make fun of people for believing in aliens. Like I really never understood that one. Because
Because
if you know anything about science, right? Like statistically speaking, there is probably something somewhere out there.
yeah,
It might not, I mean, I'm sure they've got their own language somehow. Like I would even be willing to say statistically that's likely to exist. And that's especially since we discovered like the Goldilocks zone and like some of those theories on, if certain physics laws work the same on other planets, because there's even people who would dare speculate that, well, I mean, the Goldilocks zone is just a theory because we're assuming everywhere works the same as here. That might not be in other places. So either way you slice that, it just seems likely. So I just don't get making fun of people for either one of those beliefs. So anyway, it was mostly like don't be a dick to people for their core beliefs, I guess.
exactly. So listen to our friends at P&W Homicides after this glowing tribute.
Hey, to be fair, we bring up a topic, we nerd out about it for a bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes those conversations take journeys, but yeah, so I'm excited that there is content like that out there. I'm a big proponent. If it doesn't matter if there's channels that already exist, you're going to bring something to it, go do it because you could be the exact brand that a whole bunch of people have been looking for and they didn't know it.
Exactly, and on a personal level too. I mean, both of the hosts of that show have been really sweet to our show here. So, they've gone out of their way to promote us. So, I'm really thankful that they took the time to do what they did. Now, speaking of excited, someone has a 3D printer.
Yes, that is an interesting thing that has happened in my life recently. And it's funny because this 3D printer has been a long time in waiting. And I say that because it was one of my really good friends. We talked about it before I even moved to Maine back in July.
Mhm.
And he had wanted to get this printer for us. I will totally nerd out about the brand and everything. It's called the AnyCubic. And I think there's like some S on here, so I'm still learning about it. But AnyCubic is the type of printer. It's kind of the golden child of not being an insanely expensive printer. So it's the good for the cost model.
Mhm.
Which is great when you're first getting into a hobby, right? Like we may upgrade this later. I've got stepkids in my life that I could totally see either one of them getting into this. We even saw an advertisement for one of those monthly boxes, like how they have like maker stuff. Like they've started a kids 3D printer box now. So this is getting more popular. It's getting more affordable and everything like that too. So anywho, this is a good one to get into. It's had a little bit of its frustrations, like to me having to level the bed when there's so much technology in there that could automatically sense and compensate and take care of all of that for us. Like to me, I thought that was kind of one dumb thing about this model, but the rest of it's been pretty great. There's a lot of YouTube channels to help walk you through. Like to me, it seemed really overwhelming at first, and nothing about me wanted to touch it. The Mr. Reverend was the one kind of spearheading this a little bit more.
Right.
And then I finally watched a little bit of video, and it really, like, there's a lot of people out there that like to share that knowledge. So, in a fun way, this is kind of an interesting spinoff from talking about our other podcasts to like YouTube channels. And like, again, these people just put it out there because they understand it, and then it helps people like me get into a new hobby. So I do think kind of the coolest thing is just how my brain has just been broken open for all of the practicality of it too. Like you've got the fun stuff, you can make toy sets, and right now we're working on a Minecraft themed chess set, which is going to be my stepson's birthday well, birthday and Christmas, because he was luckily bestowed with a December birthday, that poor child.
Oh
Um,
man.
so we have to separate the days somehow while we're visiting them. But yeah, so he's getting like a chess set because he really loves Minecraft. Like, it lets you do things like that.
Mhm.
So if you've got kids, it's really kind of nice because you can literally kind of print and follow the fancy of the hour, like minifigs and stuff like that, once you get things tuned in. And especially if you have like an eye for doing any modeling, like my brother does models, like he paints and makes like really cool scenes and stuff, like very like Twisted Metal themed, it feels like.
Mhm.
But people who do modeling could use this to make pieces, even if you're not into like doing the computer modeling, but you can do enough computer modeling, like, hey, I just want this piece to kind of glue to these other pieces in like my traditional model building with other parts. Like, you
Right.
can do that for yourself. The other thing is that, little organizational things around the house don't need to buy anymore. The chip clips that you can get from like IKEA are my favorite, and somebody has designed it and put it up. There's a whole website called Thingiverse, and you can just search endlessly. So if you want to organize your kitchen, I printed a headphone holder that hooks into the cubicle hooks at my new job. I printed stitch markers for crocheting because I realized I didn't have any, and I'm in the middle of working on a bunch of projects for Christmas.
Yeah.
It really does. It feeds it. You can print like little looms and craft things like that. You can print little toys. There's this one thing that's called the evil puzzle, and it comes in its own little clamshell box, and it's two-sided, and it's got the shapes that you arrange in the empty space, and one side is easy and one side is hard.
Mhm.
So it really does kind of blow your mind once you get in there and realize how many things you can print. And that's even replacement parts for the printer itself. There is this one little plastic foot, like a mechanism that you push whenever you put the filament. It's like a little string, right? For anybody that doesn't know how these things work, you get filament. It's a long spool, but it's a millimeters thick, string.
Right.
And so there's a little foot that you push up. Well, it's a plastic piece, so tension over time, it's going to break. So one of the tips that the YouTube channel had of a guy that owns this exact printer was, oh, go ahead on Thingiverse. Somebody has made this part, this part, this part. Just go ahead and print those and keep some spares, because then if it breaks, you can just use the spare you have and then just print that one and keep yourself stocked up on spare parts. You can even do mods. There's like a toolkit that you can mount to the printer itself that people have designed and put up. Anywho, it's been really fun to learn about. I am super fucking excited about it. And just it applies to everything. It's practical. It's literally the gift that keeps giving. So, I mean, shout out to my friend Joe. I'll tell him that I shouted him out. He's not a podcast listener, and it's something I totally respect. I understand. But it was seriously, it's been nice. We even named it Santa. So we literally send prints to Santa because Santa is our new toy maker in the house. So
Oh.
if it is a hobby that you were curious about and already on the end, the Reverend gives here stamp of approval that this is really cool. Like, I can't get over how practical it is too. So to me, like a $20 spool of filament will basically get rid of your need to ever get any, oh, I just need this little fucking thing that they have at the Dollar Tree. Like,
Mhm.
if you think of how many times you've done that for quick solutions in your home and you realize this thing can make most of those things, that right there probably like warrants doing it if you were already considering getting into the hobby. Even if you don't do any modeling yourself, going on and seeing what's out there in the world, like, also just really brings a lot of joy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's anything I would ever have myself, but I mean, they're definitely fascinating. Just, just a machine that can just make a complete 3D type of object just there for you. I mean, that's just amazing. And also too, I've read some of the health aspects that they've been doing with 3D printing, in terms of like using 3D printers to like do other stuff for health that just had you wouldn't be able to do without a 3D printer. So
Oh, exactly. And like actually one of the other on the manager team with Fearlandia He works in dentistry in a way. Like I forget the actual name of his title, and I'm not going to even attempt to butcher it. I'm sure he forgives me. But I know he was talking about working in an office with 3D printing. So that means they can actually make a 3D scan of your tooth and replace your tooth like to this. It's crazy what they can do. And I've heard that they're doing some interesting stuff with stem cells and things like that, even related to these, like where we could actually even print potentially body parts. So from this little level, this little 200-ish dollar printer to the
Yeah.
ones that are probably in the dollar signs that I don't even want to know. It's a really fascinating hobby. I totally get it. And
Hmm.
it goes back to the you can't beat it also being practical as hell.
Were you able to print up one of them death whistle things?
I have not yet. My friend did tell me there's some upgrades that he had to make to his before he could get it to do that. And granted, I don't know if he's played with the same temperature settings that I have because it's like baking in a
Uh,
weird way. Like this filament that I mentioned that I had a print going, it's different than the one that came with it. So you do things like set the fan speed. And again, these are the YouTube channels that can talk you through all of this. So if it sounds like I'm starting to go like, okay, T, Reverend Tracy, I was kind of interested in this, but then you started like over my head with like cooling speeds and initial temperatures and skip radiuses. And it's like, but those are all things that people have figured out a very good way to explain it to you without making you feel like an asshole. But like this one's harder and more flexible. So we had already tried to make this part that I am holding in my hand that nobody can see but Tim is another one of those things where you can print it and you add it to your printer. So what this does is it's a little hook that you can attach to the bottom of the bed because the bed is heated. You're
mhm.
dealing with melted plastics. It needs to be a little bit warm so that it sticks to it because if it's not stuck to the platform, it's going to move around and you get spaghetti mess, which is actually a term in this. You can actually, that's a whole other thing I'll get to in a second if we remember about the spaghetti monitoring. But so basically, if it doesn't adhere, so the bed is hot, but if you want to move it forward, there's this little guy that clips to the bottom and it's just a little finger hole where you can bring it forward.
Mm.
So there's a metal plate that you can clip things under. And what other people have made are things that hold webcams.
Mm.
And the reason for this is sometimes prints can take like 6, 7 hours or more, depending on, how intricate, how big your printer bed is. Mine is obviously kind of size smaller, especially since it's a best bang for your buck model.
Right.
But there are much larger printer beds out there, much bigger print jobs to do. And as I said, if you lose if your model doesn't stick, it just doesn't, so the little needle will try to go down and like it'll try to do the filament in there, but it won't be in the right spot. So
Mhm.
what ends up ultimately happening is you just get these random strings that have tried to follow this pattern and have just left spaghetti mess everywhere. So what people have done is they've made webcam mounts and somebody has made programming that will look for signs of spaghetti mess and can send you a text message and ask you, would you like to stop the print or pause it? So there are people continually improving on this hobby too, because it is finally kind of getting to that point of accessibility. So
Mhm.
personally, I also think it's an exciting time to get into this if you haven't already. So I'll probably go ahead and make sure Tim, because Tim's the one that puts up all of the descriptions and stuff. Spoiler alert, Tim does a lot of shit. I'll give you the website so that we can maybe put that in the show description, just because I do think it's a worthy one to look at if you're already considering doing it.
Make a note of that now so you don't forget.
You know me. I've already got it on my little
Oh,
board notes over here. See,
yeah,
I'm somewhat organized. I need to be.
yeah. I'm the complete unorganized mess here. But yes, one more thing before we start talking about Big Mouth this week. You wanted to talk about Mio. You had a story about the Mio drink.
Oh, yes, Tim, which by the way, I want to throw it out there. I always tell my friends that I am proud of them when they mention that they're trying to drink less soda and do like more waters and things like that.
Mhm.
And what started this was we started to talk before the show about, Tim's drinking more water. And I was like, yeah, it's a good thing. Hoorah. And you were the one that brought up if I had ever heard of Mio. And it took me back to when I first started using Mio, which, by the way, yes, I know Mio. Another good way to use it is if you're looking to kick soda, like especially the caffeine part of it. You can get the caffeine-free flavored Mios that aren't energy doused and get yourself a soda stream. Soda streams aren't crazy expensive. And then again, if you consider that you're not buying soda anymore, you're pulling that money out of that budget and you're just keeping it. And then you get a CO2 thing every once in a while. Not a big deal. So that was something that I started doing too, like to just not have soda as much.
Hmm.
Life hacks with Mios, I guess. But then going back in the Wayback Machine, it gave me a giggle. For those out there that know the term Soylent and know what that product is, and it's way more available now.
It's not
I
people.
it is not people. My joke is yet. Give them 10 years of just blind like customer loyalty and some very vague formula changes, and they might be people. But right now it's vegan, so that's exciting. I was an early adopter onto Soylent, and so what was funny was I never used Mios for water or anything else. I was never really a big like soda drinker. I didn't like Kool-Aid either. Like I love water. It's something I've always enjoyed drinking. I've never had to talk myself into drinking water.
Right.
It personally confuses me when people are like, I don't like water and that you need to squirt Mios in it. So I knew they existed, but I just had never had any use for it. And so Soylent came along, and when Soylent like first came out, I know you guys can go to the store now and there's like berry flavor and mocha and chocolate and vanilla and all these ones that didn't exist. Um, I followed Soylent back when it was still being created and formulated. Like he was just finishing his blog about experimenting with this concept of replacing food with a drink, and it not be a diet thing. He just wanted something that gave his body what he needed. Very
Hmm.
busy guy. So little nerd out about Soylent, I guess. It got created out of practicality reasons. He really just didn't want the decision fatigue when he got home, and he wanted food units, and especially for lunches, because most days he realized he didn't care what he had at lunch for work. Like he just wanted something that didn't make him feel hungry in 10 minutes or didn't make him feel like he wanted a nap or whatever. So he
Hmm.
started looking into it, like chemically what our body needs every day. And that's how Soylent got started. It was a blog and a self experiment. And the next thing you know, he's got a startup. And then back in the early days, you used to have to add fish oil to that. And that was the thing that made it like not vegan, because to get again, the point was for it to be completely nutritionally balanced for what your body needs.
Hmm.
So had to do that for a while. Then it finally hit renditions, but it was only plain when it first came out. And I was so excited. I got my first tub of it. It was plain and plain alone. And
And
I was
I
the
was gonna
one
say,
that
I
added
remember
stuff.
you were, yeah, you were using it when we first met.
That's right. Yeah, because everybody thought I was a weirdo, like at my office, because I would just have it shipped to work because I didn't need it at home. Because I was that way, man. I did not care what I had for lunch. I just want food units. And that's why it's like, yeah, sure, leftovers. And then sometimes like you don't really want to heat stuff up. Like I liked drinking my nutrients. So yeah, I would have it sent. Everyone thought it was strange and weird. And then next thing you know, I'm like, we had an espresso machine because I worked at a tech company when I got into ordering it on the regular, and I would have it do like the shot of espresso, and I
Hmm.
would basically make a latte with my Soylent, and everybody thought it was really weird. And that was where I got into Mios. So I was able to add whatever flavors I want. So for anybody out there who does Soylent that wishes they had a certain flavor, a good kicking it back to old school hacks when it first came out, go check out your Mio section. Really, really good stuff. And then even so, there's also the other little hack of like you can add it to a soda stream if you're looking to kick sodas. I know a lot of people that have been talking about trying to get healthier, which is hilarious, by the way, because I am the person people go to
Hmm.
of my friends, because I share pictures of the food and I talk really openly about, my health and like trying to do stuff that's important for me. And I don't always nail it, but I'm always trying to drive for certain goals. Like I suck at drinking water. I know I need to be better at it.
Hmm.
So I do think it's kind of cool that when people like want to get healthier, they're like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I'm not a medical professional, but I'll tell you it works for me.
Me, I just played a doctor on stage once, so I'm not, but
I
yes,
just I've got to watch. It tells me most of my health rubrics that I need.
and or yeah. The Mios for me have definitely been great. They've definitely been a great kind of substitute to wean me off of the high fructose corn syrup type stuff. When like today, the professor is out because she's actually signing papers on her brand new condo.
Woo!
Yeah, so that we're going to be moving here, all moved by the end of the month. But she actually does have a soda stream already. We just haven't hooked it up here. But now that I'm on the Mios, I mean, the plan was already to kind of utilize like the soda stream again to start saving some money that way. So
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't even think mine wasn't one that you had to hook up. There wasn't anything like a plug or anything to it. It was just you had to get the little canister and it just sat
mhm.
wherever. So I'm sure there's a dozen different models or maybe even some that aren't the name brand Soda Stream at this point.
Oh, I'm sure there are definitely plenty out there, but let's stop talking about that. Let's start talking about what's bringing us here today. Big Mouth
Yay! Big Mouth. We are on the
season.
second episode of
Yeah,
season 5.
indeed, that is called The Shane Lizard Rises.
Oh, and with a name like that,
We know who's back.
I kind of feel bad because I went into this episode and I think I kind of predestined it for myself that I wasn't going to enjoy it.
Hmm.
And we'll get to that with the summary and as we go through, but I don't know. What do you think of when you think, yay, an episode that's around the shame wizard? Or are you like actually, yay, I love the shame wizard? Like, as I'm sure there's lots of people who really love his antics. Like, that's me. I was like, yay, the shame wizard.
Yeah, it's like they need to talk about that because of the subject matter with kids and whatnot, and frankly adults too. Adults are still frankly just as much wrapped up in shame as anybody else, so it's an important topic to discuss based on what they're talking about. But yeah, like anytime he's been on the show, it's felt like a drag, and like yeah, like you said, when we do dive into what we liked or didn't like about the show, I'll go into the specifics why I didn't really care for it, but just yeah, just the episode itself dragged, but it did have some great topics, some great themes that they touched upon that I think we can dive into. Like one of them, swimming and puberty, that first time noticing the physical differences among your fellow peers.
Right. I mean, and it wasn't really the first time, right?
No, obviously he's back, so they've had an issue with shame before, but I think this is like the first time that the kids have been treated kind of like teenagers, because like the previous time, that was the episode where they all had to sleep over at the gym.
Oh, okay. I get what you're
Brought the
saying now.
doll.
I was saying like I feel like we've done a lot of the noticing the girls' bodies before.
Oh, that.
And
Yeah.
so I just took the wrong thing, but you're saying, okay, now I'm with you.
But yeah, I mean, I think back in like I know in like grade school up until about third, fourth grade, it's just like you didn't have to notice other stuff. Just like kids were there. There may have been girls there, but they were just girls, and you hung out with the boys. But then like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, that's when the social stuff starts occurring, and like little things that weren't a problem before, like glasses. All of a sudden, you're a nerd. You must have a 4.0. Shut up. Things like that.
Yeah.
What are some of your memories about dealing with that growing
Oh my gosh. I had the most mortifying of mortifying things happen. And I'm so thrilled that you brought this up.
up?
I get to share this because now I have to, because this is how my brain works, guys. It really is kind of a disease. So I was at church camp. All
One
great
time at
stories
church
start that
camp.
way. Yeah, a little bit. So very unfortunately, so I was a poor kid, slash not prioritized when it came to getting new things. So I got a lot of hand-me-downs, including a hand-me-down swimsuit from my mother that like it hadn't been used in a long time. She's like, it's fine, and you need it because you're going to summer camp tomorrow, and whoops. So she gives this thing to me, and I hadn't developed up top yet.
Hmm.
as much as maybe an adult woman that had had some kids had. So we'll say that it was loose there, right?
Yeah.
So I had thought that I was pretty clever in the sense of I had gotten like a hair tie and like made it look like a little, racer back before those were cool, I guess. Uh, but I went under and came up, and it happened. The top of my swimsuit was below. And it's great that that happened at a Christian church camp because, it's more forgiving when it happens there. So
Yeah.
that's the only time. And like I loved swimming. Like I was more of a take me to the lake, please, not to the pool. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of that really was from that self-conscious because you can't just like dip under and hide it when you're in the pool, but like all of the water in Texas, because I have to also preface being raised in Texas, right? All of the lake water, like you get your hand under there and it's gone. I've realized now since traveling different places, it's very different, but pretty much like everywhere that I swam, the little lake in my town and the little lakes and creeks and stuff everywhere was like that. So
Right.
I liked that better, but that also could have something to do with that general discomfort around my body, like not even the worried about it happening again. But I also just I've had questions about my anatomy since I was young. So I've felt a little bit of that discomfort feeling so revealed. And that's what really sucked is like, yeah, swimsuits are swimsuits. I mean, I was super jealous of trunks, man. And that's what I thought was interesting about the episode is like, are there schools that actually do Speedos? Because usually like dudes had like trunks and stuff when I was a kid. So that was something I couldn't quite relate to with this one, but I don't know if things have like updated for some reason so that that would now be the standard of, I mean, they're not going for top record breaking speeds. There's no reason to take into account drag, like in the
I
water
mean,
drag.
it's like we've already established that there are characters that are on like the swim team, and generally like swimmers they're not going to have like the baggy swim trunks, like kids would wear or anything like that. So but to your point, yeah, like Nick, for instance, had a Speedo, and I've never once heard his character mentioned being on the swim team or anything like that.
Oh gosh, and Andrew was wearing the same thing with the pubes, and I get that like it's not my favorite humor, but it's one time where it actually made sense, by the way. Andrew's kind of thing with his
Yeah.
bush or whatever, because I did appreciate that they kind of covered the variety of the things to feel self-conscious about.
Hmm.
From the camel toe situation and the back knee and things like that with the girls to, Nick is always self-conscious about his penis size, Andrew, and I'm sure that's something that dudes do worry some about, right? Because those swim trunks aren't thick. Some of them are. So I could see some self-consciousness around the genitalia because it's thinner material and it's like the most naked you are like encouraged to be around like the opposite gender in those ages.
I mean, I'm sure that stuff happens. I think back to, the times when I was a kid in a locker room or anything like that. Never once did any of my fellow, schoolmates say, hey, my dick is bigger than yours. Let's compare each other's dick size. And just some of the conversations they have on this show just are so unrealistic. But having said that, it was it was still made very clear that when it comes to stuff like genitalia, guys were supposed to have big ones, and just if
Oh yeah, the yogurt burglar guy, like that whole thing. And granted, like there's that was kind of funny. Um, but yeah, like I also need to preface like I didn't have the gym locker room experience in my tiny school.
Mhm.
So I don't know how normal swimming is in like most schools. We didn't have swimming. We
Yeah.
had PE and I don't remember like super locker room situation. Like I think we just kind of like jogged a little bit in our clothes for the day and then that was it. Like we didn't break a hard sweat and hit the showers.
Oh yeah, like our school, we didn't have a pool either. It was the rich schools that had the pools that would have like the swimming class for PE or something like that. And like with us, like, we play basketball, play volleyball or something like that. And then, just 9 times out of 10, most people would just go into the locker room and just change right back into their regular clothes anyway, and not even do like the showering bit.
Oh, yeah.
If you were as disinterested in gym class as I was, isn't that big of a deal. So it's not like I broke out a huge sweat and then just decided to go, back to like biology or anything like that.
Exactly. So I guess like that's a little bit of a negative on this episode for me,
Mhm.
is if the point of Big Mouth is to relate to most people's experiences, this one was a little bit of a loss as for the specific situation. But I did like it. It's still kind of got the point across of that general self-consciousness of the body with that flair for hyperbole that they have. And normally I really hate like the coincidenceness of it. Like, oh, really? You mean one of each of these is going to have like some major stereotypical body image issue? Like, really, we're going to get one person has this, one person has that, one person has that. But granted, given because of how this show works, I felt that didn't bother me. I'll get into later, they did kind of the same thing in this episode later on in the hospital, and I didn't like it, but I'll get into that one when we go into the negatives. But I did like that they covered the things that generally most kids feel self-conscious about. And then what's interesting is really generally most people still feel self-conscious about, because to me it helped point out like, wow, we didn't outgrow any of that. Like most people don't seem to, it seems.
Oh no, like and think about it too. Like I think to some of my female friends that developed, if that makes sense, at an early age, bigger chest, let's be honest here. And, a common story I hear from them is like as kids, when they started developing early, they got teased a lot. But then the older they got, the people that were teasing were suddenly really interested in them. And then it got me thinking that could really fuck somebody up, like
It
something
does.
something that like you've been told for years and years is something that you should be embarrassed for is now something that people are falling all over themselves to, this type of stuff can really fuck people up.
I can speak from experience, Tim.
All right.
Yeah, because I was one of the unfortunates. I developed over the summer. And the reason I say that that is unfortunate, because there's this stereotype of, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm gonna go back to school and now I've got boobies and everybody is gonna be like, you look hot.
Mhm.
And that's not at all what happened, because when you're not popular, usually it's, oh my God, she started stuffing. And then you get mocked for being a stuffer, which led me to actually flash somebody, which now realizing as an adult, like, okay, child me totally shouldn't have done that or been ever in the position to do that. And that just goes back to even small schools
Mhm.
seem to have a lot of toxic, unchecked environment in there.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the public school system, and I think this is why stuff like this. But I also do remember, like at one point, because I had been teased for being stuffed, it justified one dude who was kind of known for being a little bit of a bully slash prick to flick me on my nipple in the middle of gym class. And I remember feeling so embarrassed and confused. And I don't even understand. I don't even think he used it to clear my name. He just said that, he just needed to check. The curiosity was killing him. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of weird mixed messages because I went from like nothing to a C. So that's pretty dramatic to go from flat to C over a summer.
Yeah.
So it got talked about. I very much in earlier seasons with Gina when she came back, and there was that, right?
Yeah.
She was getting the attention in different ways. Now she did get some negative attention from the girls from a more jealous route, but I don't think they ever did the she's stuffing thing. But yeah, I very much related to that situation. There's awkwardness around boobies. And it's like, I don't know, maybe if we just teach it as just anatomy and stop glorifying tits, like it just can be less weird for people.
Well, even stuff. I mean, you've already mentioned Andrew with his pubic hair. I mean, I remember in Middle school. It was a bus ride home, and I just remember hearing like some students in front of me, including a friend of mine, talking about like, isn't it weird that that person got pubic hair, that it's grown out so big and whatnot? It's like, why are you talking about that?
Why
First,
do you know that? Well, I mean, I know
yeah.
why they're talking about it. I can throw that one out there just on a child psychology level. They need to troubleshoot what they're learning.
Mm,
And when we cannot have comfortable conversations with our children as adults, they will look to each other. It's really that simple. And then the problem is it turns into collective bullying. So
mm.
because they don't have a place to take the information they're learning, to have a comfortable conversation with someone with calm, patient knowledge, they're trying their best to figure it out as their own little class of people, and it's resulting in this weird side effect of bullying. That's my total how children's brains work and process thing, and then my kind of second theory is to how that's actually accidentally leading into bullying.
Yeah, and oh, that reminds me, like you had an embarrassing swimming story. I better tell mine.
Oh, good. I was just going to skirt past it if you didn't want to.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was middle school, and it was summer between middle school and high school, and in Grand Rapids there was this water park in town that some friends of mine invited me to. So I went, brought my swim trunks. They were white, and
Oh, I could see that being an issue. Okay.
yeah, so like I get on like one of those like slide things that go that it's like a steep incline. You go down really fast and then you splash into the water at the very end. So I end up doing that and then get out of the water, and then a friend makes a joke about the Vienna sausage in my pants, and like
Oh God.
it was like at the rest of that day was me spent getting dry as quickly as possible, not going back in the water.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. I mean, needless to say, I didn't go back into the pool that entire, like, yeah. I didn't go back to the pool that summer break. But yep, I think I recall like some giggles about white trunks, like at some of the summer camps. Because summer camps and pools, like that's always a thing. I didn't make that mistake again. I did eventually go back to swimming pools. Don't worry, guys, I swim.
Now, when it comes to shame and the items that we both are wearing on our heads, have you ever had any sort of shame directed at you because you wear glasses?
Oh, well, I don't know if I've ever felt a sense of shame on my glasses. Now, did I get picked on for it? Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
any excuse they could find. That's the answer. It's like, hey, Reverend, did you get picked on about insert blank? It's like, well, can you think of a way to make fun of somebody for that? Because the answer is probably yes. And that was where my Latin life happened with school. It's just how it happened. And even in my own house, like I kind of got picked on a lot. Like the four eyes thing got muttered by my own family members.
Mm.
So, well, I mean, they thought it was being funny because Married with Children had been out. So
Uh-huh.
the idea of picking on the ones that you love was already being kind of put out there in households. So, they loved me. That's why they made fun of how I walked and what I wear and everything.
So,
But so yeah, I totally got some of the four eyes thing. I don't really recall that ever like shaking me to my core though. Like they found way better ways to affect my personality. But
yeah.
glasses, nah. It just was a knock that I just thought was like I like that my brain always thought that was a dumb insult.
Well, I wish I felt that way in high school.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah,
get it
because
pretty bad?
well, for me, my eyesight started changing around fifth grade, and like we grew up poor, not lower middle class, just poor. And when I had to go, to my eye exam, we went to a place in an eye store in the mall. They had a lot of beautiful frames. That you did the eye
Oh,
test, and then at the end, you get to pick your frames, and then what the person did each and every time was they would bring you to a table, and then they would open up a drawer, and then they would take out a tray with the shittiest looking frames from 1942 that they could find, and those were the only ones that were available. And so like the frames I would have were never wire frames. They were always kind of like what I'm having now, but they were always like different colors too. They just looked old, and it got to the point to where I felt so embarrassed about having them. Like my last 3 years of high school, I didn't wear my glasses in class, and I couldn't
mm,
see shit. The only time I ever felt comfortable wearing them was like literally the last day of school. Like I wrote and produced a play on my last day of school, and whatnot. And like I suddenly realized it took that day to make me realize, why am I not having my glasses on? I can't see stuff. But yeah, and I also had definitely teasing, growing up too, in a lot of ways. It happens, when you're introverted, when you don't dress the best, when you don't talk as purdy as other people, you're going to get goofed on, and that came with the territory, I guess. But glasses, for a while, I definitely did have some stigma, even into adulthood. When I was comfortable wearing them, for the longest time I would only get wireframes, because wireframes to me meant rich.
Exactly. Or like the ones where it had the cool little invisible, the clear under part. But
Yeah.
now, like these thick plastic frames are like they've made them look nicer. So I will retract at least slightly. I did get made fun of for the types of glasses that I wore because of being poor,
Mhm.
but not so like, so I guess like looping it in with in general, I got made fun of for being poor. But the eyesight specific part like never was a big deal for us. But see, I'm also a chunk younger than you. And now
Yeah.
like I'd almost want to get somebody the next decade down and just be like, "Hey, did you get made fun of?" I wonder if that's something that's kind of disappeared. Because it also was an interesting throwback. Like, not they weren't always checking for or pushing kids to get glasses for a long time there. There was a long time where it's like my brother never got glasses until like, he was out of school. But like access to it has changed quite a bit, I guess is what I'm saying. So kids are more likely to get glasses earlier when they need them
Mhm.
rather than dealing with it later when they're actually like trying to drive cars and things like that. So I think it's just happening earlier because of access. So possibly it's phased out. It would be great because I do think it's interesting. I don't recall that they've done that on Big Mouth. I don't think they've made fun of the Four Eyes thing, like other than just, they pick on Andrew in general. They may have thrown the term at him just to be a dick, but there doesn't seem to be that
Well,
in any of the shame episodes or being self-conscious.
Well, when I was a kid and I was goofed on, it was always the people, it was the common theme was, are you getting a 4.0? Are you smart? It was like some sort of an insult that I was smart, some sort of anti-intellectualism type of thing, like, how dare you be successful? Like I remember this government class that I took too, and this one kid was just like goofing on me for like learning. And then I finally turned to him and was just like, you do realize that if I learn this stuff, then I don't have to take this class again. Unlike you, he took the class twice, and yet he was goofing on me.
Yeah, because learning's for squares.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, last I saw him, he was working at a McDonald's. So hey, good for him.
Oh, well, that's for some people, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you for
But
coming to McDonald's. I love you.
McDonald's, I love you. But yeah, I think that maybe that's spacing out. I like my glasses. Now it's more like when I want contacts, I just want them for the practicality reasons. But I do remember for a little while wanting them. But
Uh,
anywho, glasses.
Me, like, I absolutely adore these frames. I mean, these are the same frames you met me in 2017. So I should, by all accounts, have a new set of frames by now. But when you find I call these my Clark Kent frames. When you have glasses like this, for me, it's just like you wear them suckers out. So, but I should.
Oh yeah. And then I keep ordering mine through like Zenny Opticals. So now it's like become a fun accessory. Like
Mm.
I reframed it where it's a fun accessory now. Now I've got like a few different colors and a few different styles. I would order one for characters. When I had the 50s show that was supposed to go on, that's what got me into cat eye glasses. I never thought I would like those. I literally only got a pair for the stage. And then
Mhm.
I went, oh my God, these are cool. And I fell in love with them. And now I wore that pair out because I put nothing on it like for scratch resistance or anything. It was really meant to be a stage pair.
Right.
And so like the parts that were chipping off, like I wore the hell out of those cheap like $5 Zenny glasses.
Mm. Well, let's move on to the next theme here. This theme, I think, I kind of overlooked it last week. It was touched on a little bit last week, and a little bit this week as well, and that's getting rid of items that used to belong to an ex. Do you remember ever having to deal with that as a kid?
As a kid,
Or
oh
an adult
God,
too,
like,
know?
oh, as an adult, definitely, because I've lived with people, so that gets a little bit more necessary. But
Yeah.
as far as like the boyfriends and stuff in school, I don't know. Like, I had a few little boyfriends, and I don't recall it ever being like a long-lasting thing, like where we had each other's things.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just me. Nobody dates the unpopular chick for too long. Let's just throw it out there. But then I guess in college, no, I can't really think of much. Maybe I've just never really kept a lot of other people's stuff. I'm a little bit interesting like that anyway. Like I don't, I'll borrow, like I had my ex-husband's sweater, which I think is hilarious because I gave it to my stepdaughter. Oh, it's a really cool sweater too. I took it. I totally took it. I took it on purpose. I don't feel bad. That's the one thing I got in the divorce was his Reunite Pangea sweater. It was worth it. And
Fucking
then
sweater.
I took his sweater. He never asked. He had time to ask, but he never did. And then my stepdaughter started wearing it and she goes, "Hey, I really like this hoodie. Can I have it?" And I was like, yeah, sure."
Sure. It'll have
So
a
my ex-husband's hoodie is now proud property of my stepdaughter.
Well, there's one thing though that in terms of stuff, like I agree with you to a point. Like the idea of like having personal belongings of someone you're in a relationship with is probably more something that, you know, the older you get, the more likely it's going to happen to you, college and whatnot. So it's to be expected. It's not necessarily going to happen to kids this age, except for one thing: pictures, especially when if we're talking relationship, special pictures that, you know, you can send between a person or two. Like, any experience with that?
Um,
That
no. I've sent photos. I like doing that. I think it's a fun way to like be sexual in other ways. I think it's a good way to explore, especially if you're not around each other. Some of the early dating, it can be kind of fun,
yeah,
because you're not as physical as often as you would be if, say, it did excel to something where you're living together. So it gives you a little bit of that intimacy that you don't get by not having that living arrangement.
right,
So it makes sense to me. I get why people do it. I'm not one of those like, why would you ever? Because I've done it. I used to kind of be a little bit that way in my head. And then I don't know, I questioned why I thought that way about it. And
yeah,
so it just kind of led me to feeling how I do. But it's never been an issue. Like I could see where that is a big problem because that is intimate photos. And
mm,
that's a big betrayal in a culture that by and large seems to encourage hating people based on the fact that your relationship didn't work out. And like it almost gives a lot of permission to dehumanize them in that sense. So you're not seeing a picture of you in a photo with somebody that you love. You just see you in a picture of a photo with you with some other thing in it. And because when you start disrespecting somebody at that level where you justify hating them, you're not really thinking them on the same level that you do like a person in
no,
that sense. Like, right? Like when you almost like dislike somebody to the point of objectification, and I've just had friends that seemed very guilty of that. Like there's conversations that I will walk out of like, "Hey, I know that you're mad at this person right now because your relationship didn't work, but I'm not condoning this." So I don't say those things. I just
right.
excuse myself and leave the conversation. So I totally get it. I have been super fortunate in that sense though, because I am somebody who shares photos of that nature. It's never come up. Now, as far as like the danger part of it, and as far as keeping them goes, I've never cared. Because it's in a weird way, it would be like me insisting they delete every text message or not remember any exchange or keep like destroy any gift I ever gave ever. Fortunately, I just don't care. I'm not going to sit there and hunt somebody down. I've deleted the ones that I had because why would I want to?
Yeah,
Um, it just
that's
doesn't mean anything to me anymore. So
and that's my thing too. Like, have I ever taken a picture like that before myself? Sure. And my sister's listening to this right now is like, I didn't fucking need to hear that, you know. But to your point, yeah, like revenge porn is a thing. There have been plenty of women, including a congresswoman, that ended up having to leave Congress because they've had, significant others to where a breakup occurred, and you would have stuff like text messages being sent around with pictures, or even worst case scenario, for the longest time, Pornhub was a big repository of revenge porn. And
Yeah.
like my philosophy is like, yeah, like the moment any sort of intimate relationship goes, those types of photos need to go away right away. There's no reason you should have them. Delete them, get rid of them, shred them, do whatever, unless a person specifically says it is okay for you to have them. Because especially in an emotional state, and if you are dealing with kids in an emotional state, you're going to make some decisions that you end up later regretting, be out of anger because you want to hurt that other person. And so it's having the personal stuff can definitely be dangerous. And I think too that kind of goes along to like, what types of conversations should parents have with their kids about the photos that they should be taking? Like as a parent, you want to give them proper sex education. You want them to be able to explore themselves, have the freedom to explore themselves, but in a safe way. How do you do that with photos?
Oh, exactly. Like it's such a whole thing with phones. And that's where it's like I am glad that, one product that I can say, has considered this is Google. They do have Google Family Link, which has been really cool. It's a tool that we used. We had let my stepdaughter have one of my old phones as a Wi-Fi phone, but I'm not stupid. Like that phone is meant for an adult. So we had looked into what was out there. And what's really nice is you can really kind of lock it down in that sense. Like, and it's not over encumbering for the parent either. For example, if she had ever gone on and said, "Hey, I want to download," let's just say Snapchat, for example. And so what would happen is any adult who is connected to this and has the app would get a little pop-up that says, "Hey, she's trying to download this. Should we let her?" And then me as the adult will go, "Fuck no." And then in my head, I will go, "I will talk to my child about this later." And then conversation can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Not you discover it 2 weeks later because it's already been downloaded because they heard somebody talking about it and were curious about it. Like
Right.
it actually lets you be like in the know when you use it appropriately. However, it seems like a lot of adults are just going, "Well, my kid's a good kid, so they can have it." There's a lot of good kids out there. I would dare say most kids are good and not trying to be bad. However, you have to realize that giving a child a phone is like putting them down a long hallway, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of doors down this hallway. Now, there's like one door that opens like family game nights and Jenga and like playing little card games online. There's other doors where it's like, sure, Snapchat's meant for 13 and up, but it's also a really fun way to interact because of the little Bitmoji things that are in there. So, maybe you want to unlock that door. But right across the hall is Pornhub, so you might want to make sure that door is locked because your child might not intentionally be looking for Pornhub, but they might open the wrong door. So that was how we had kind of talked about like phones and stuff when we had first given, my smartphone to one of my stepkids to play with.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conversation that we're missing because it goes back to there's a lot of really fun stereotypes of adults versus children that I also think is a little bit perpetuated by the public school system, where it feels a very verses and verses. And a lot of even our entertainment does this. It's like the kids versus the adults in one way or another. There's any number of like child's movie that's themed around this concept.
Yeah.
So, all that to say that I lost track of what I was fucking talking about because that happens occasionally on this show.
Yeah. Thanks, Weed.
Yeah, thanks, Weed. No, I didn't actually. I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm good. It just happens
Photos.
that way with the show. Oh,
Photos.
photos. Sorry, but yeah, basically, as we're talking about. So we get like the parents versus the kids, and the reason that makes sense for this is kids get handed phone, and then it's not talked about, but things are locked. And then you tell me I have to take things off of this, and it just feeds into that fight. Whereas if you have the conversation that there might be situations around this device, like as you give it to them, it can be something that you're teaching them how to use versus this is yours, right? Because is there not a different attitude behind a gift of here, this is 100% yours versus this is something I'm giving you to learn how to use this. Like your first car, for example, maybe. Like it might not be 100% your car. And it's either, you're borrowing your parents' car, or maybe they did get you your own car. So this is just kind of that situation where you have your own car. Because, right, like we've seen parents hand over their phone and there's like locking systems / they're sitting right there, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's just really that difference in kids, and it's treating it like a tool you are introducing them to instead of a toy for them to have. And that's where we're at with it. And maybe like the photo conversations can come naturally with that because they're being given a device.
As long, of course, as you are also having the other important conversations that you're supposed to have, because if your kid is not comfortable talking to you about intimate conversations or intimate situations, you know, it doesn't matter what,
Yeah.
yeah. So, uh,
Defensiveness can come out of abnormality. So
mhm.
because it's weird that you're trying to have a serious conversation with them, it feels weird and almost like they're being sat down in a way like they're in trouble or something. But if you've normalized having conversations with your kids, you can parent. Like this should be really no issue to parent through giving a phone. But anyway, and even having these conversations because your child should feel like you're on their side, like
Yeah,
not looking down on them.
it
But
it reminds me of my oldest when he was in kindergarten, and we were walking home one day, just me and him, and then he asked me, like he'd asked me like a birds and a bees type of question. So my ex-wife and I had talked about it, and then we decided that we were going to be honest about it. But I explained it to him, as honestly as I could, use the appropriate names and whatnot, only to have him at the end, when after me talking what sex was like, him saying, "But do you pee in the woman?" And I'm like, "No."
but kudos that he felt comfortable enough to ask a question
Mhm.
because a lot of times kids don't. And it's like, dude, really, they're little humans. We just have decades of experience on them. And if they feel like you're safely trying to just portray some tips, but ultimately letting them figure out most things, it goes pretty smooth. So it's like, yeah, it's like parents will come in and want to like lay down some kind of law, having like no other like relationship conversation that's built up to there ever needing to be a law around this thing. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I think phones are introduced kind of early and fast and loose. When I'm fine with them being introduced early, like honestly, I'm totally fine with it within reason because conversations are happening.
Yeah, and I think the evidence is pretty clear too that kids that do have these electronic devices for long periods of the day do tend to not be as socially active, I guess, as they should be, or something like that, or stunted in some ways too. Like Steve Jobs. He made it very clear, like his kids never touched a computer, never touched an iPad when they were in school. He didn't buy that stuff for them. And I know with my kids, there have been when I was living in the house, of course, when pretending to be married and all that, there would be times where like my kids would be like on their devices for an extreme amount of time, and then trying to take it away from them would be like trying to like take like raw meat away from a pit bull. You're not.
Oh, yes. But that's where, again, it goes into being helpful, help them set patterns and be the example too. Because the other thing that sucks is when you're doing a bunch of shit on your phone, but you're telling us, like, you should be off your phone at 6 o'clock at night. Click, 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 play
Guilty.
swipey game. Yeah, but if you know that's a good role for the brain, just show it to them. Do it with them instead of barking commands. And I know it's a little bit of a digression because we were talking about like keeping photos, but
Yeah.
really it is, it's because it's part of a bigger conversation that we
Mhm.
should be having around cell phones when they're introduced of things like this, because really kids should not have any sexually explicit photos of themselves on a phone ever. It is child pornography. It is illegal.
I don't like the term child pornography because it's no such thing. Pornography among consenting adults, that's pornography. Picture
Then
it.
underage, it is by the, I thought that was the legal thing, but legally it is illegal under a certain age. So covering it on that level alone is also worth doing. Yes, you should cover like your body and how you should be careful with who you share information with, but like really, children should be knowing that it is illegal for them to do that.
Because think about a young girl. This is just a theoretical situation. Young girl, 16, her boyfriend is 18, and she sends him a picture. And 16 is, depending on the state, one of those ages that, in the wrong hand. Like if a parent found out that that picture was sent to this 18-year-old, that kid could go to jail and be brought to court for statutory rape. And like, yeah, you just got to be careful.
Yeah, it's Romeo and Juliet laws. We had them in Texas as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't think, and I'm open if anybody knows like legally how this pans out. When it comes to pornography, context is not included. They do not care that you are intending it to go to somebody with where the relationship would be legal doesn't make the photos legal. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I understood that stuff, like that's the one thing is like it's illegal. Like children should know, hey, don't do this. It is illegal. Like you should not be taking pictures of your body in any state that you wouldn't be out in public.
Exactly.
If don't take a picture on your phone if you don't want it up on a billboard, because that also goes into the security of it too. Because A, it's illegal, and B, that also kind of feeds into the like, who are you sending it to? And are you going to trust them forever with this? Because it goes into my mentality of with photos. I can't control you, Tim. If you had photos of me, unless you did something of malicious intent that would have caused me to find out that you had them, it wouldn't have hurt me ever for you to have them, right? So I've realized that because I can't control that, I should just be like, well, I trusted them when I sent it. But I have to take that into consideration anytime I make that decision with any relationship, though. And that's something that is just 2 steps into the future, parts of children's brains that haven't developed. So it's just, to me, seems easier to cover this is illegal.
Yeah.
Like people can have to either pay a lot of money or go to jail. Like there's a lot of repercussions for this if it did get found out that you had them. And I think that's almost a good place to start, because whether or not you agree with it being illegal, I still think it's the responsible thing to let a child know that it's potential for being illegal.
and to me it's really the same conversation you would have with kids about like alcohol, about rated R movies. And that's just telling them that there are some things that are just not made for kids. That doesn't make them bad, but they're just not made for you.
Like my kids know, my stepkids know that I do a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
My stepdaughter is older and knows what a podcast is. She very well knows how to find it if she wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But I have let her know it is not for kids. It is something that I really don't even think you'd like the topics that we talk about anyway. But we do also cover topics that are really just more for adults.
My 15-year-old thinks the show is boring. So yeah, I don't think she would want to.
Oh yeah. So there's that too. Like, it's like we talk about stuff that's not your interest. Like, and it really isn't. Like most kids don't give a shit what we talk about. Like, sorry, adults, we're lame.
Yeah, like no kid wants to spend 20 minutes talking about a 3D printer, I guess.
Hey, you know what? They're gonna enjoy these toys from Santa. I don't know. Like maybe my stepson would listen if I said that, hey, buddy, I said what your gift is. And then even then, like he probably would make it like 10 minutes in and then start watching Curious George.
Oh, I mean, if that can, bump up our audience numbers so we can get advertising with Anchor again, that would be great.
Oh, yeah. Here's a minute for a shameless plug. Do you guys like our podcast? Forward it to your friends, because apparently there are benefits on thingies if we can get like maybe 20 to 30 more listeners.
Yeah, they changed their rules. Like when we switched to Anchor back in April, we were able to do advertising right away, and I was able to add it onto every single episode. And we weren't making much money. It was just a penny a play, but that was a penny a play more than we were getting before. But they changed their rules. The rule now is that the minimum listenership that you have to have per month is 50 average listeners per month. Last I checked, we're at 22. So, I'm still going to pat myself on the back for that. We got 22 people that check out our podcast each month on average. That is a good thing, but I would like to build that up because it'd be great to make a little money.
Yeah. I mean, it's there. So basically, they don't want to pay us any less than 50 cents.
Something like that. Yeah, but and they have other options too, including like a Patreon type of thing to where you'd have like monthly contributions or just a donate button. But to me, the advertising just makes the most sense, like
Yeah.
because Patreon has had some success for us, but nothing major, and I would just much rather have an ad. But let's dive into Big Mouth.
A little bit more. So we just finished I think we've beat the phone thing to death. So there's a lot of stuff that could be covered on phones in general with kids. And this episode does kind of hint as to maybe why those conversations need to be happening. So if you do have a kiddo out there, just gonna throw that little seed into your noggin. Just think about it. Let it grow. Decide what you're gonna decide. But the phone thing is worth talking about.
Uh, yeah, I mean, especially if you have a daughter. I mean, you got, there are a lot of bad people. Yeah,
Both.
both. I mean,
Sorry. I totally get very, very twitchy about the making it about the one gender on that one because both are victimized a lot, especially because they are children.
right.
So I would say like I'm so sorry that I cringed. I try not to have cringe responses or reactions to people, but that one was like, oh man, can we put the PSA just children in general? Like, yeah, watch out for both of them because our boys need it too. And we've gone into that actually a bit in the show, I think, with some of Nick's stuff. So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the good though. This
yeah.
episode, what stuck out to you as good?
I liked covering the variety of things a human can feel self-conscious about. That was something that I gave a little bit of early praise to, where normally I don't like oh, what a coincidence. One person got each thing. Aha, what are the odds? I really appreciated it at the pool scene because if it's going to happen, that does seem like the most likely scenario to get the full variety in front of you.
Mhm.
Um, Jesse deciding on if it's time to shave or not to shave. That was something I thought was really good because that was something I related to. That is a choice, right? Like you don't choose when your boobs grow in. They're either gonna come in 3 cup sizes over a summer,
Oof.
or they'll come in 10 days after you've graduated high school. You know, like they have no control, but you do have control over shaving your legs, and there is like pretty much hair there, like always.
Mhm.
So to choose when to do it, that was something that I thought was interesting that got brought up, and like the weird pressure and the picking on, because I do remember that a little bit, or even like interesting things that girls did. Like I do remember there was a girl early on, right? Because this is when we're all learning how to shave with nobody really giving us clear instructions on when, where, how, and why.
Right.
She like shaved everything but her knees because logically you must not need to shave them because every time I do, I nick them. And I remember, and it made so much sense to me when she explained it to me. But then I also recall everybody made fun of her for having hairy knees. I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, nobody else has hairy knees. So I guess we are supposed to shave that part.
But are you supposed to? I mean, like the good thing for me is like they did a good job of showing the kids react to shame in different ways. And also it was good at how they did this because they showed that the only time their bodies became a problem was when someone else pointed it out. Like Missy with the back knee, like she didn't wasn't even aware that it was there, but then when Devon made the comment, all of a sudden she was devastated. And same thing with Jesse with the shaving, same thing with everybody else in this episode. So I think it did really good there at showing how somewhat silly shame can be because of the fact that you only feel that shame when someone points out the supposed imperfection.
Exactly. And I thought it was really great. I didn't write it down, but it was something that Devin did where she had said, like, well, what was it? She basically did a very mini monologue, and I wasn't going to go back and try to get it verbatim, but
Mhm.
she very quickly just basically justified why she points out flaws in other women is to help them.
Devon, yeah.
And I thought that was kind of genius to just throw in there the way they did, because it makes you go like, yeah, what was the justification? for any of that. Like, what would the good reason be? So just kind of to your point of they didn't know it was a problem until somebody said it.
Mhm.
So what good reason is there?
None. None. I mean, because like we talked about, the women that develop early, that get goofed on as kids, but then when they grow up, all of a sudden everybody loves it. It's you shouldn't feel shame for your body because it is your body. You have no real control over what happens with your body. Just celebrate it.
Yes. It goes back to I'm a big believer of the Socrates, the kind of rule of three. And
Mhm.
the third, like basically, is it true? Um, and like you test so basically, what was the point in Devin saying anything to her? And it fails the test of three just because is it good or not? Like, is it gonna be any good to the person hearing it or not? So it's like she tried to justify that it was a good thing to tell these people this, even though it was really just kind of a shitty thing to
Yeah,
say these things.
because
But yeah.
yeah, I mean, there is no standard. The only standard we put is upon ourselves. And even then, like my standard is going to be different from yours, it's going to be different from the professors. Everybody has a standard.
Exactly. So.
Cool. All right, the bad of the episode. What stood out as bad?
Oh, okay. Can we get off the fact that Nick has a tiny dick? It's like that maybe instead of naming it Big Mouth, they wanted to name it Tiny Dick because it's just like you think you're going to forget about it and then it comes up and it's just an obsession thing. And what's sad is I wrote that down, but at the same time, it does make sense that it would keep coming up because it got displayed in a very public and very embarrassing way. And that is exact formula for crap that kids remember. Like all through. Like I could honestly see that coming up all the way through high school.
Mhm.
And that's even experience of how rumor mill and gossip worked in my tiny town. And you'd think it would be worse there. But then there's all the people that think that it would be better in a small town. So it's kind of funny to talk to people about like how the rumor mill sticks
Mhm.
because I think it can be just as bad in bigger schools, and it seems to be in Nick's case. But there's part of me that's just I'm so tired of his tiny dick conversation. But at the same time, it does make sense that it keeps coming up. So it's weird because it's bad because I realize it's me personally bad just because I'm tired of hearing about it, even
Yeah.
though it does still totally make sense that it would come up. Um, the other part of it I get that they're trying to cover a variety of what ifs, and I covered at the pool scene where I appreciated it. This is the counter where I did not. But really, all of them in the emergency room at the same night. Like the pool made sense because you're gathered for school there every day for school. Everybody getting crazy ideas on shit to do to their bodies on the same night and then ending up in the emergency room. It lost me a little bit there on that one. I think I would have respected it more if it had been a mix, like maybe one or two of them end up going for medical assistance and the others had been like parents just helping them. Especially for they went a little too hyperbolic on some of them. Jesse's story seemed the most unlikely to end up in the hospital. So it's like they didn't all need to end up in the hospital. And it was kind of stupid that some of them ended up in the hospital.
Yeah, like
Um,
Jesse with the shaving, like
I've never, and I've totally like I've got a scar on one of my legs from accidentally getting myself really bad. Like, no way in shit will you. And I will totally. Somebody share an article with me. I'll go ahead and throw it out there and challenge. If somebody can find somewhere where somebody talks about that they cut themselves shaving their leg
mhm.
so bad that they had to go to the emergency room because she wasn't experimenting with shaving around genitalia like the boys were. Hers was just her legs. So that one to me was just too much, too hyperbolic that she wound up in the emergency room for that one. Seemed
Yeah, and
just
like
no.
anybody with any sort of experience with a razor of any sort, whether it's a man or woman's razor, knows that yeah, you can easily get cut. But that one, there are no major arteries that I'm aware of on the leg
Not the
necessarily.
shin, not where the cut was. So it goes
Yeah,
back
yeah.
to very specifically where the cut was matters.
Yeah, and like too, just like I don't like I think she would have to like pull the razor blades out in order to really cut as deep as possible to get the level of blood that was in that episode. Like I can imagine like shaving with a rusty razor blade on your leg probably doesn't feel good at all.
No, like God, you would stop for so many reasons before it got to that level. And it was funny because yeah, I related to the, oh, it's like that white color. That's the blood. Like I've done that before because I mentioned I've cut it. But like, first of all, like her dad couldn't have handled like a cut leg. Because that could have just been like a personal embarrassing story for her. It didn't need to go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. The others seemed far more realistic. The egg with Lola, because experimenting, hers was having to do with like labia size and like with her vagina. So I did understand that one. And yeah, there's even adults that get stuff stuck up there that have to go to the emergency room. So that one seemed super viable. The vacuum with Nick actually seemed more realistic. Um,
Heard of that
it,
of happening. I like you don't want to because in those type of vacuum, I learned this on Howard Stern, not by experience.
I like that you prefaced that for us, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. No, inside of those of the tubes in a vacuum cleaner, like there are actually like little lips going on that if you're doing it wrong could easily like cut your penis. And like you don't want to do that.
Right. So for so many reasons, don't stick your dick in a vacuum tube. And then the scissors with Andrew, again, it seemed more realistic than Jesse. Uh, but then that one lost me at Nair. That's where it goes back into bad, and I have a whole other separate paragraph on just Andrew in general, where that's where I talk more about the Chodsker. So I will put a pin in that there because that was a hefty paragraph, and I'll take a break and go to you.
Okay. For me, I mean, what I wrote, like most of the episodes just seemed to be exposition dumps. It was most prevalent during the dinner with Nick's family when they're talking about penis size. And, when every time you would have like the dinner, you would have the shame wizard appearing with somebody else. It just followed the same format, and like nobody in the episode is really talking like you would expect a person to do. Obviously, it's a TV show. They're not they're not supposed to mimic how people really talk, but they're supposed to make you feel like that, you know, and I just didn't feel that. And to your point, like the penis size, like I'm sorry, I don't think a family would sit back and have a long conversation about penis size.
But theirs is that quirky family though, because see, it's not a weird topic for them to go into. It did feel forced and canned even for them.
Yeah.
So that being said, I do agree that the dinner set like kind of felt like a weird dump. Even though the family does cover the topics like with a lot of ease, it seemed weird even for them.
Yeah,
I
like
don't know what it was. It just didn't sit right.
it wasn't weird that they had the conversation. What was weird was the actual content of the conversation itself, because it just again just felt like the script writer was writing things for these people to say because they had to say it, and it just didn't feel natural to me.
Yeah,
And so,
and that's the situation they decided to cram them all in. I feel you on that one.
yeah, and also they utilized the shame wizard way too much. And there were just a number of conversations for stuff like penis size among the kids that, we've mentioned before. They're having conversations with each other that I don't think kids that age would really have. Like, wasn't it this episode where Jay goes up to Matthew and say, "Would you look at my erect penis? It looks totally different."
Oh, yes. He's like, oh, I realize you think it looks weird because you've only seen it like flaccid or whatever. And then, yeah,
Yeah,
he like, gets it hard for him.
yeah. So
I mean, I don't know. He's a weird fucking kid, but it also goes into he's not in the healthiest household. So,
yeah,
as far as if a kid is going to be a flasher, because that's a teacher catching them away from it being a phone call to a parent, and that's not completely out of the realm of possibility. So that one didn't get me as much because it goes into Jay doesn't do things like on a sexually normal level because he's in a house that's not good.
mhm.
And abnormal sexuality is a way to act out. Aggressive sexuality is a way that kids act out in abusive homes. So that one actually didn't take me out too far when we take it into the context of you and I talking about that there does seem to be a serious situation going on with Jay's family.
Mhm.
But yeah, but the Thanksgiving dinner I'm with you on. Jay, I found an excuse for, I guess.
Okay. Good for Jay. So, final
Why is
score.
it purple?
It's like the head came, it's like the skull came out of his mouth. No.
So before I do my final score really quick, I'm going to take a break back and talk about Andrew for just a second because this episode just he irked me more than usual. Andrew's a character that I try to take with a grain of salt and just understand that he's a character I don't relate to
Mhm.
at all. Um, Andrew saying, "Let's see how the girls are progressing." Just ugh. I don't know if I should put this under good or bad. It's good if they're trying to make Andrew come off like the biggest asshole creep in school, but bad if this is being pitched as quote normal behavior, assessing how girls are quote progressing. I guess that's kind of why I wish they'd take Andrew's very obvious issues around his sexuality a little more seriously as a topic. Instead, I feel like they're just making him a gross form of a sad sack. And that's where I got into the chokester and just the huge eye roll that was. And the Nair, like, well, who's writing jokes about Nair these days? Oh my God, that seemed like it could have been left out forever.
They stole a
Um,
joke from Three's Company. I don't know.
maybe like, oh, talk about like that would probably be some serious medical problems if you get that into an open wound because that's like it melts things. Like that's how that one works.
Yeah, and like I'm so far with the first two episodes a little disappointed at Andrew. It seems like Andrew has just become more of a two-dimensional character than he's ever been. And
Right.
that is a little disappointing.
Yeah, like I wanted to like Andrew's character a lot. I liked him more when he was developing his feelings for Missy and like actually getting some ideas of intimacy instead of just sex.
Mhm.
But I don't dig how his character is progressing.
No.
And it goes back to I want them to have a better point to it than just normalizing quote gross boy behavior is I think the best way you can encapsulate Andrew, even from just stupid sexist digs like the how are the girls progressing stuff to just some of his one-off comments are just skeezy and gross feeling. And I don't know, it just that boy needs checked out.
In many ways, yeah. So,
Yeah.
what is your score?
My score, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's probably the lowest that I've scored. I know the scoring system is a little bit newer anyway.
Mhm.
I have such mixed feelings when it's a Shame Wizard episode because I just feel like it's going to be hit or miss. Since sometimes the shame feelings make sense, but other times it's more like the shame we'd feel as adults now. The point of the show was to relate to what I went through in puberty, not what I get now as an adult. And ultimately, the unrealistic hyperbole really took me away from relating on this episode much at all. There were brief windows. Normally, I feel like I relate a lot more to what's being covered. This one had very brief windows of that. And then it seems like the hyperbole ruined it, right? I related to the shaving,
Mhm.
but not taking her to the emergency room. I related to, the shame around some of our body stuff, but not the weird ER stereotype play out that happened as a result of all of that shame around body stuff. So definite I wouldn't rewatch it. This is probably one that if I'm watching it casually in the background, I might skip it unless I'm just in the middle of cleaning and don't care.
Right.
But not a good episode for me. What did you think of it overall?
For me, slightly better score, but not by much. 4 out of 10. The episode dragged. There were a number of storylines that were taking time, that were all essentially saying the same thing. Like even though each of the students had different things they wanted that they were shamed about, it was still the same thing. It was the shame wizard coming back and then it was just more and more and more of the same thing going on. It was just
Yeah.
another repetitive episode, and this felt really, really long because of
Right. It's like you can't flex shame all that much, I don't guess. Like I feel like even the hormone monsters like have more to them than just hormones necessarily.
it.
I
Mhm.
know we're about to be introduced, it's not for the next episode, but the love bugs are kind of neat. I don't know how much further you've gotten into them, because I think they are an interesting concept for a character because there's some evolution that we'll get into,
Mhm.
and changing even how that can happen. So yeah, Shame Wizard is just, how do you design him to be anything other than a two-dimensional character? And then how much can you actually make a successful episode?
Well, to me though, it's like if they had only had him focus on one, maybe two of the people, then they could have had it bounce back and forth. But the fact that he kept doing the same thing with Andrew, with Nick, with Missy, with Jesse, it just repeat. It's just the same thing, and it just killed the flow of the episode. Like
Yeah.
if they had utilized him properly, if the script had been formatted just a little bit better, then I think my score would have raised up. Because to be fair, I think that some of the themes that they did bring up in the episode, I think some of the topics, as we're going on 2 hours now, they did a lot of good. The fact that we can get as much stuff as we did out of there. So I don't want to make it sound like this is one you must completely avoid, but just it needed to have been structured a lot better than what it was. Or if he's going to be back, maybe spread it out over a couple of episodes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like if something's going to get repetitive because character does the same thing, it's like they're not implementing the art of just like implying that he's still doing it. Like they could have just covered it with just his voice whispering,
Mm-hmm.
like behind them, just for a second, just so that you know that the shame wizard is also in their head too. Because there's some kids that don't really seem affected by it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That aren't experiencing the shame wizard the same way, or at least at
Yogurt
the
guy,
same
yeah.
level. Yeah, like the yogurt kid. So that's fine. Like, so we'll never have him with, the sound of the shame wizard in his head, but they could have implied that a bit better just to make him less present. And it would have been different if that presence had brought something different every time, but because it just keeps bringing the same thing, it's
And they
just not that
are,
entertaining.
I mean, and I think they've already used the sound effect of like him saying shame really quietly, like in the background. And you could easily just have that and have them like be outside, and it could be the wind, but
Yep.
and they could have done it. They dropped the ball.
Yeah. And even then, just him saying shame, even without the win, just that shame, like it's fine.
Mhm.
Like I would rather hear that 10 times in an episode than the character come up and say the same thing 5 times.
Yep. Yeah,
Because it,
because
it goes back to you're implying a bigger message. Like, it's not just saying shame for the sake of saying shame. You're hearing that to imply that he is very much in action in these kids' heads too. He is an influencer.
basically the writers should have trusted the audience that it's like my critique of that one scene from Die Hard that really irks me. There's a scene at the beginning where he walks into the Nakatomi Tower, asks to see where can I see Holly McClane. The guy tells him to type the name into the electronic keyboard, and the only purpose of doing that is so the camera can show that his wife is using her maiden name. Then when he says it's on the 30th floor, then the guy at the reception says, oh, they're the only people left in the building. You didn't need to have the electronic typewriter, because later on they have it to where he goes into her office, sees her name. He could have easily just looked at her maiden name on the
Yeah.
office door, given a dirty look, and it would have said the same thing as in this episode if they just had shame.
Yes, like just something to cue us that whose head he's in and who he's not. Which, granted, if it's a shame episode and it's focusing on a kid that seems to be experiencing shame, I even think they could have just left it at that and let it be implied that he does mess with people who feel shame. I think the most we needed was a hint, though,
Yes.
and I think you kind of nailed it. You nailed the thing that I couldn't put my finger on. Is I didn't like being spoon fed it the entire time like that when it was the exact same thing. If it's
Yep.
adding something different, well, then that's adding value. But when you just tell me the same thing over and over, it makes me feel like you think I'm dense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I would like to think that people that watch Big Mouth for the most part are a little bit more in tune with stuff, and I think would have been able to understand it. But that's The Shane Lizard Rises. Next time, we're going to be introduced to the Love Bugs.
Yes, I'm so excited for these guys. So I have to know, like, just checking in on you. Have you already watched it all, or are you still just kind of episode by episode right now?
So far, I'm officially 3 episodes deep in terms of like officially soaking it in for what we're doing. Like I've mentioned, the professor watches it all the time, so it is on a constant loop here. So I've definitely picked up other episodes along the way, but I'm definitely excited because like so many memories came flooding back when the love bug hit.
Oh my gosh. And I do. I'm more excited to talk about the Love Bugs episode than the Shane Wizard episode. And I keep fucking up his name. It's so funny because Coach Steve calls him Shane Lizard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I end up calling him Shane Wizard because of that. And I've done it, I think, 2 or 3 times in this episode. Just like, maybe no one will notice. So, maybe you guys can tell me how many times I accidentally said Shane Wizard. But yeah, I'm excited about the next episode, and then we'll figure out what topical thing we're going to talk about at that point. And yeah, I think this is a really solid place to leave it.
Indeed. So yeah, thank you all again for listening. Every Wednesday and Saturday, we're going to have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. So until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Take care of your ear holes.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.